out comes John Cooper of Skillet, and he said, "Hey, I just signed a record deal." And I said, "Hi, I'm your radio promoter." Then took me in. He said, "Come see my signature right on your desk." Ink wasn't even dry yet. I could have smudged it right there.
Pretty funny. I still speak with John. He's doing really well, doing good work. So,
Hi, I'm Nick, and I am here with the legendary Eddie
ooh.
DeGarmo. Eddie, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for joining us.
Well, good to be with you today. Good to see you again. It's been a minute since
It's
we've spoken, and it's always good to see
Yes,
you, Nick.
always great to see you too, Eddie. Last time I saw your daughter, she was working A&R at Forefront, and now a great grandfather.
Great grandfather. Of course, that was a lot of years ago that we were together at Forefront, Nick.
That's true.
That was a while ago. So, yes, my youngest daughter worked with us at Forefront, and she was in the A&R department, which, for those of you who don't know, that stands for artist and repertoire. And
Repertoire.
yeah, repertoire. Uh, and we would be the ones that would, search out new artists and make records with new artists and put them on our label and make videos with them, and then hand it over to you experts that were in the promotional side to get the big megaphone and tell the world, right? So,
Yes.
uh,
But before that, we usually sent it back to you and said,
yeah, maybe you ought to work on this one a little more.
tweak this.
Heard a little bit of that from time to
Is that
time.
too real?
Yeah, that's pretty real. So, but I mean, my gosh, we had a good run together, didn't we?
So
And
fun, Eddie. So
yeah,
fun. Yeah, I came in on that first American record from Rebecca St. James, and just unbelievable to, see that family. And speaking of that family, actually, tell me what you thought of the preview of the film Unsung Hero. You're in that film.
well,
Well,
not
an
personally.
actor. Yeah.
There's someone depicting a younger version of me that
You're,
has the hip hair, and all that stuff. I mean, how can you not be uh, what's the word, enamored with that sort of thing? And but the Smallbone family story is a very touching story about a family that was kind of on the ropes and moved here from Australia, 1991 or two, something
Mhm.
thereabouts.
Yeah.
And I knew David Smallbone, the patriarch. I knew him from Australia,
Yeah.
uh, but we had a happenstance meeting one day when he knocked on my door, and he and his two older sons were looking for work to mow people's lawns. And so I hired him to mow our lawn. And one thing led to another. And, then I hired Helen and Rebecca, which I didn't know, either one of them. They were cleaning houses. So I hired them to, spruce up our house once a week. And so we started a really good relationship that turned into us at Forefront signing Rebecca to an album contract and working with her. And of course, she had a wonderful, wonderful career for a long time, and still
Yes.
is active. Where she's married now with three little ones of her own. So, and of course, her brothers, King and Country, or King and Country, to be specific, have even gone on to greater heights. And oddly enough, I still work with them. You know, I do kind of a different thing with them. I don't really help them craft their projects anymore, but I work with them on their business side and their contractual side and all that sort of thing. So
That's
I've been,
amazing.
I've been with the Smallbone family since then, what, 35 years, I guess.
That's
And
unbelievable.
so they made this major motion picture in theaters all around the country. And there's a guy that depicts me, and I went up and I met him, and he He wanted to talk. He said, "So
Good.
if you have anything important that maybe tips you can give me." And I said, "Bro," I said, "I grew up in Memphis." I said, "You got to be low and you got to be slow."
That's perfect. I
and,
love it.
and he kind of plays the part. And
Yeah.
his name's Jonathan Jackson. For those that follow movies and TV, he's a known actor and did a nice job depicting me. I'm not sure I buttoned my shirt down that low and wore that many gold chains, and I certainly didn't live in the style of house that they've got me depicted in, but it's all good fun.
Yes, it is. I saw the original cut of that film and then saw the final version, and I so appreciated the final version compared to how they had Eddie DeGarmo in the first first rendition. So maybe he talked to you between.
Yeah, hopefully it got better and better. I hope so. I hope that's what.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I do remember. And I had read Helen Smallbone's book and was taken back to so many things. Literally, I remember Rebecca St. James running up the stairs at Forefront, back along that back wall. And I popped out and she said, Nick, we're going to take girls on the road. And so, what she meant by that was she finally had the opportunity to bring some friends out with her because the road is lonely. And I mean, how many years did DeGarmo and Key? How many years did you guys tour?
It was almost 20, right at 20, and we started in the early 70s.
Yeah.
And our first album didn't come out until 1977, but we toured till 1994. And I walked away from that when things were still really good. And I've been asked many, many times, why did I make that decision? I never wanted to be, the old boxer that was, in the ring punching in his last fight, trying to make a comeback. So I walked away when things were still really hot from D&K, and I had a
Yeah.
place to go, and that was very helpful because we had started Forefront, the record label. And so I went into Forefront full time actually in 1992. And for 2 years, I toured on the weekends and was at Forefront through the week. And
Yes.
then I walked away from D&K in 94.
Yeah, I remember a couple Mondays when I was there going down to find you. Oh, he had a show last night, so he's not coming in till later.
Yeah, yeah, I know it. I was burning the candle at both ends
Yeah,
for
you were. Yeah.
many.
And the songs I remember down there in right next to your office, that writing room, just
Yeah, yeah.
the music and the lyrics that were coming out of that. And not only were you starting Forefront, but you were starting it on fire, with the music and the artists and the things that were happening. It was a really special, special time. So it's good you had the energy for that.
Well, we were blessed. I've been asked a lot about that through the years, as you can fathom. And, how did you guys? I mean, we were a little bitty indie startup label. And, you know, when we walked away from Forefront, it wasn't long after that, about year 2000, we were the largest independent Christian music label in the world. So
100%.
kind of like cooking, Nick, you can only be as good as your ingredients.
Mm,
At Forefront, we had some wonderful artists,
yeah,
Sea Talk and Audio Adrenaline and Rebecca and Jeff Moore and Skillet and
yeah.
Big Tent Revival and Small Town Poets and Code of Ethics and oh my gosh, Jeff Moore in the Distance. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. We had just some wonderful folks to work with. So
I remember us recording that video for I Know It's Not the Rain from Michael Anderson. Do you remember that video?
I
Wh-
too, and I love that record.
I do
It was
too.
maybe the worst selling album that we put out.
Oh,
Uh,
it was so artistic.
It was, yeah, and Michael, I still keep up with him. He and I are
Good.
still friends, and we still talk, and occasionally we'll get together and have lunch. He's such a talent, but he was ahead of his time. I think.
Yes, definitely. I know it's not the rain, and I still had played it even last year when I was working at radio, and it just is so special. And of course, we went down to East Nashville, and I was cast. I don't know who has that music video, but I was cast in that video. And Jeff was there, my husband, and he said, you know what, after it was all done, he said, we're never going to East Nashville again, because it was a little bit scary at that time.
In those days,
um
yeah, I think it's made pretty good comeback
I
since then.
know. Well, I was going to say, not a year later, Jeff and I bought a house in East Nashville, not far from where the stadium would be built, and we paid 73.5 for it.
I can't. Well, good for you because you made a good investment.
We did. We
Good for you.
did. We definitely did. We sold it. I was having a porch sale, was selling some video games and things like that. And this guy walks up across the street and he says, I don't suppose your house is for sale. And I said, well, it can be. I guess we can. He was from California looking for a spot in East Nashville. And
There you go.
man, yep. So
Things
California
work
money,
out
even then.
sometimes. Good for you. Congratulations.
It was good times, good times. I remember we had a record release party over there, and I invited the Grits guys to come out, and they're like, I'm going to East Nashville. I
Yeah,
said,
it's
you're
pretty
in a hip
funny.
hop group. You're
I know
coming to
it
East
was pretty funny.
Nashville.
They were pretty afraid. We had a group. You'll remember this group on Forefront called ETW,
Yes.
and we were doing a video in Marathon Village. And of course, this would have been, in the mid 90s, sometime early 90s. And Marathon Village was just kind of coming back. It was still pretty rough
Yeah.
part of town down there. And they were like, man, I mean, you come down here often, man. I mean, this is different, and these are three boys from Tulsa,
Right.
down in the ghetto of Nashville, looking over their shoulder while we're making
It's,
videos. It was pretty cool. I'll never
yeah.
forget that. They asked me to rent them three bikes, and I thought they meant 10 speeds, but they were talking like, no, they were wanting like, those
Motorcycles.
fast motorcycles.
That's hilarious. Did you give him 10 speeds?
I did. It was pretty funny. And they were like, no, man, we need some with a motor on it.
That is great. Yeah, I remember the first show when I started working for Nashville, ETW and DC Talk played downtown Nashville. It was
Yeah,
quite
yeah.
a show, quite a
Back in
show.
those days. Yep.
So let's talk about DC Talk being on the road with you guys as roadies for DeGarmo
Yeah.
and Key.
Well, that was something that worked for both of us. I mean, I don't think either side necessarily looks back on it that it was the perfect decision, right? But our band, DeGarmo and Key, we were at the heyday of our career, 1989, when DC Talk, when we first started working with them. And interesting thing about that, Nick, DC Talk did not know that I owned Forefront with Dan Brock. They didn't know that because I didn't want anybody. It was back in the days that I didn't want anything interfering with my artist career,
Yep.
and so the label we kept it on the down low, right? And so we were at the height of our career, playing to big crowds pretty much every night, and we were looking for a way to bring an unknown group on the road. How can that work? Because we had, you'll know this from radio promotion, but a lot of times when you have artists that are first coming on the scene, their labels will give them tour support to help an established artist take them on the road,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yep.
you're sharing your audience with them basically,
Mm-hmm.
because nobody knows who they are. And so we were looking for a way to share our audience with DC Talk. And at the same time, I was the label owner. And so how do I give my band money from my own label to tour an unknown artist, right? So we came up with this crazy concept. Well, we need some people to help us do some stuff on the road. We need, so Toby Mac was our concession guy, and K Max, and this was really funny and really bad in thinking in the end, K-Mac was my keyboard tech, you know,
Wow.
which was nuts. And then Michael Tate was setting up the drums and the guitar amplifiers and stuff. And of course, again, they did not know that I was their label owner. But that's how we afforded to share our audience with them because we paid them for their work. And they, they were doing maybe 15, 20 minutes a night,
Yeah.
so we traveled them, they traveled with us for a while till they got their own little bus to travel in. And we paid them every night to do those jobs for us. And of course, they laugh about it now, and we laugh about it now. And depending on the conversation, sometimes they say, "I can't believe they made us do that," but it actually worked the way that we set it up,
Yeah.
and it shared the D&K audience with DC Talk and gave them their first platform, and they delivered during their 20-minute set, and audiences fell in love with them. And by the time, I mean, they toured with us maybe a year and a half, Nick. And by the time the end of the tour, sometimes it was hard for us to take the stage because, the young audience wanted more DC Talk. That happened.
Wow.
So there you
Wow.
go. Yeah.
And think about the rock that you have brought into, well, into the DC Talk space. Obviously the influence of that rubbed off in a good way.
Well, I mean, I'm, so proud of all three of those guys, but publicly, of course, Toby Mac is still, he's the little train engine that, you know, couldn't, right? That always did. And
Yes.
Michael Tate keeps reinventing himself with the Newsboys or, doing Christmas music with Michael W. Smith. K-Mac's an artist and a poet and makes
Yeah.
music still. So, I'm proud of all those guys.
Yeah, I remember you remember that K-Max was adopted, and I had come into DC Talk right at the time when Kevin's mom found him,
Oh,
and she was touring around show after show after show. It was causing him a lot of stress, as you can imagine, being an adopted child that then is being uh, well, has a super fan that's his biological mother.
yeah, K-Max had to go through a lot of that stuff that a lot of us don't have to face
Yeah.
because he met his mom and dad, his biological mom and dad later in life. He was
Yeah.
maybe 21, 22 years old when they started coming around. And the more popular he got, the more that he saw them. And I don't know how that relationship ever fostered or ended up, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah.
Uh, he hasn't talked to me about it necessarily,
Yeah.
but I mean, I think he's grateful that he found his biological parents, but it's not uncommon. You see this in sports a lot when
Mm.
these kids become superstars and all of a sudden
Yeah.
the father they never knew shows up type thing. I think that's even happened with uh, Meghan and Harry. The British royals. That her her dad has shown up. I don't know
Mhm.
these facts, so I'm just kind of talking about it. But
Yep.
you know, uh, popularity does breed that, and it can breed that. And I think sometimes it can be really a good thing, and other times it's probably uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah.
So
Yeah. Sometimes at the same time, I imagine.
probably so.
Yeah. Well, I always really, and it might just be who you are, Eddie, but I really felt like there was a brotherhood between you and Dana Key and you and Toby Mac. It always, and of course, your love for K Max and for Michael Tate, but just always a really special brotherhood that I was able to witness, and it always just was a really special part of what I saw in the hallways, but also what I did as a job.
I mean, it was, you know, real. And Dana and I mean, gosh, we met in the first day of the first grade, you know. So it's hard to find relationships that lasted that long.
Yes.
And you know, I'll share a bit of a funny story that for your audience that doesn't know, Dana passed away. Now it's been, I think, 12 years now. So, and when they did his service, uh, he was a pretty popular guy in Memphis where he still lived. So they decided they would actually have a very small service gravesite before they did kind of a memorial celebration, which
Yeah.
was later, which were there were thousands of people there. But they had asked me to speak at that celebration, and the private ceremony, there was only maybe 50 people there, and it was all family members. But his mom and dad called me and said, Eddie, you know, your family, so why don't you and Susan come? So we got there, and it was in June in Memphis. And if any of you have ever been in June in Memphis, you'll know that it's really hot and the humidity is like, you know, almost 100%.
Yeah.
And a lot of the folks that came to this small private service were, you know, elderly folks in their 70s and 80s at that time. So it's about 10 minutes before 10 o'clock when it's all going to happen. And Dana's brother in law comes over and he says, Man, I got to talk to you, Eddie. Something's happened. And I said, What? And he said, Well, he said, the guy that was due to preach the service here thought it was at 11 and he's 45 minutes away. And so I don't know what to do. And I said, David, I said, this this will be fine. I said, why don't you open us with a word of prayer and then I'll do it. So I preached Dana's service at graveside. You know, I laugh about it because it was so apropos for him in his life to be that unscheduled and out of sync. And
Yes.
secondly, I'm pretty sure in the, you know, 50 years that we were friends, it's the only time he stayed still while I was talking to him. He was usually always running up and down the hallway, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it was a good time. Of course, I miss my friend, but it was a good time.
How special that you were able to do that. How
Yeah.
special. And I know there wasn't a dry eye out there standing.
Oh, I don't know, but it was all good. And then, you know, we went to the service that afternoon, and again, it was, I don't know, there was a lot of folks there.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Unbelievable. I remember him calling me up at my desk and because he was at Ardent in Memphis at the time. And I was, of course, working Ardent music. And one of those that we had that was really special to him was Big Tent Revival. And he said, no, don't you be working Eddie stuff today. You need to be focusing on Big
Yeah, he
Tent.
would do that. Yeah, he would do that. You got to watch him.
Yep, he had me on a speed dial for that.
That's
So,
fun.
yeah, and I mean, I still think Steve Wiggins is one of the best, like vocalist, guitarist, storytellers. He just such a talent.
Yeah, he's a very, very talented, creative fellow for sure.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
he and I still reach out to one another as well. So
good. Man, you collected talented fellows. But I know that there was a lot of other people that wanted to be signed at Forefront, even though it was indie. What they loved about it is that it really acted like a family, and they wanted that most of all because it had so much authenticity. So, how did you say yes to certain artists and others let them go on to
well,
different labels?
and well, you know, we were a small staff. I think at our peak we had 34 people, which for a record label is still relatively small in those days because we were doing all the promotion and press and
Yep,
publicity and getting their stuff made and manufactured and doing the videos and all that sort of thing. So it was all hands on deck all the time.
it was.
Uh, and we had 16 artists that we worked with, which, you know, we had half as many artists as we had people almost.
Yeah.
probably some stories that you may not even know today. Some artists that wanted to be on our label
Yeah.
that I just didn't feel like that we had the bandwidth to
Mm.
take on, from a staff perspective.
Yeah.
Charles Clay,
Yeah.
Third Day,
Hmm.
so I passed on Third Day and Georgia Clay, not because I thought their music wasn't worthy, or they weren't great people. It's
Yeah.
just we didn't have the wherewithal to take on new artists at that moment.
Mm.
I even
Hmm.
put Skillet at Ardent Music because they came to us first, came to me first because I've known John Cooper since he was gosh, I don't know, 12 years old or something, and so their manager brought them to us, and
Hmm.
I took them to Ardent in Memphis
Yeah.
because they were from Memphis and they needed some work, they needed some development.
Yeah.
I mean, the first demo tape I had from them, Nick, it was so outrageous. It was unbelievable. I'm not sure you could sing any of it, or
Wow.
scream any of it. So they needed some time to develop. But I knew John, and at that point Ken Storts and the drummer Trey. I knew they needed some time to work, and I thought Ardent was going to be an excellent incubator for them. Same
Yeah.
with Big Tent Revival. Big
Yes.
Tent
Yes.
Revival were brought to us, and and Ardent Wiggins knew them and was from Memphis,
Yeah.
so I felt like that they were a better fit there too. So,
Yeah. Wow. Look at those two sounds in Skillet and Big Tent Revival coming out of Memphis. So
well,
special.
yeah, and Ardent had quite a run with Small Town
Yeah.
Poets also.
Yeah. Small Town Poets was another fantastic sound from them.
They
Yeah.
had Todd Agnew. They had quite a little basket of talent there that did some wonderful things.
I love that. Yeah, small story. You remember before coming to Forefront that I was working at a radio station up in New England, and I had found this cassette tape at a local Christian bookstore that I went to, and I would post my Nick pick of the week at the radio station, and I would post the songs that I was playing on the station as music director for them, and found that cassette tape called Contagious, and got a hold of Mac Powell, and I was like, I want to play this music on the
Well,
station.
yeah,
And
you might have been the one that brought it to me. I don't remember. I guess you were, but
yep,
yeah, they were
yep,
on a little label called Gray Dot.
Gray Dot, Marty Bush. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, and they would rehearse at the Strand, which was a wreck at the time. And yeah, I played a lot of that. Mac Powell says that he said if somebody up in New England will play our music, maybe somebody else will play it too,
yeah. They
And he has said that I was the first radio station outside of Georgia to ever play Third Day music.
That's cool. Cool story. I don't recall that story, but that's a great story.
It is, definitely is. And then of course they signed and redid a lot of that Contagious record, and I was like, where did the band go? It got so slick. I needed that
Yeah,
that rugged sound.
yeah, that's pretty. That happens a lot, though, doesn't it?
It does, right? You talked really quick about Dana Key and you guys knowing each other since the first grade, but tell me about your childhood. When did you pick up the keyboard? When did you know? And a follow-up question to that is, do you still play? Do you have something that's a go-to that when you sit down at the keyboard, you always do? While you're thinking about that, I have a quick story. When we lived in East Nashville, I played the flute growing up, and I had found it upstairs and decided to play. And I had those go-to songs. One was from Chicago, one was from Prince, and I started playing. You just pick it up and it kind of like muscle memory, you start playing.
Right,
And
right.
my husband's downstairs walking around the house for 40 minutes. I come downstairs and he said, the ice cream truck is parked around our house and I can't find it anywhere. Of course, it was me playing the
Oh
flute
yeah,
upstairs.
he thought you. That's funny. It is funny. Um, to answer your question, I mean, there were two questions there. How did Dana and I get started in music? I was probably a little before him in music, in that I was born in Detroit, Nick. You probably didn't know that, but my mom started teaching me piano when I was maybe 3 or 4, but she played piano at church.
Yeah.
And like most 3 or 4 year olds, I hated it. I wanted to be outside, playing in the dirt. I didn't want to be playing piano. But she started me really early on. And when we moved to Memphis, it was 1959, a long time ago, and moved pretty much across the street from Graceland Mansion. And it was all farmland in those days and a few little gatherings of houses here and there. And so we lived in rural Memphis, really. It wasn't Memphis, it was actually in the county in those days. And my mother sent me to, I fondly call her a piano witch, right? But she was my teacher. And this might have been the third grade, maybe. And, they were teaching me standard stuff out of a series of books. If you're a music guy or person, you would know these books, John Thompson, Easy Piano, and stuff like that. And I just didn't like it at all. But this lady was really smart because she went out and she bought me a Beatles songbook. She said, "Well, let's learn the songs you hear on the radio." And that was kind of all it took. So I was off to the races. And when I was in the fifth grade, my my dad, the great Baptist deacon of his day, went to the dog track in West Memphis and won $1,200, which in 1964 was a big stack, right? And so he went out the next day. Maybe it was the guilt of the sin, or I don't know, but he bought me a little combo organ. And so my older brother, that was 6 years older than me, played the guitar. So he and I started a band in our neighborhood. And we were called the Chants, 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 right? And we started playing little dances, and in those days, people still had those kinds of things, and a lot of the churches hosted them. Not the Baptists. You'd have to go to the Methodist or the Pentecostals or those other churches. The Baptists, they still didn't dance in those days.
Yeah.
So we would play at these dances, or we would play at the skating rink, or we would play, you know, little parties here and there. And so I was playing in a band in the sixth grade, and Dana, my friend, and I, we had always visualized being in a music group together, and it just started to come together probably the end of the sixth grade. He had gotten good enough on guitar. Well, you need to be a little older to play guitar because your hands have to be bigger, you know. And so he had started playing guitar, and so we got up our first little band in the early part of the seventh grade. So that's how we started.
Unbelievable.
You had a second question, but I can't remember what it was.
If do you still play? Do you still
Oh
play?
yeah,
Do you still
I
sit?
do.
And what do you play if you
I
do?
do. And interestingly, maybe you'll find this interesting. It worked for me. All those years that I toured and made records and we wrote our own songs, I spent all of my days playing my own music, right?
Yeah.
And so when I had the time, when I walked away from music, which we'll get to that in a minute, that was on my 60th birthday, I stepped out. And I'd always decided that if I could do it at age 60, that's what I was going to do. So I stepped out. I started learning a lot of other songs that I'd always respected. Songs like Leave On by Elton John, or, Piano Man by Billy Joel, or, New York State of Mind, or, the stuff I grew up with.
Yeah.
And or all the Beatles songs, or all the Rolling Stones songs,
Oh
Give
my
Me Shelter.
gosh.
You ought to hear it on piano. It's pretty cool. So
Yes.
I started learning all those songs, and I probably learned, I don't know, 100 or so of them
My
that
God.
I would just sit and play, and I would sing, and my wife would say, "Why don't you ever write anymore?" And I said, "Well, I've just never learned other people's music." And Nick, I got to tell you, that was really good for me
Wow.
to learn other people's music and play it and learn how they sang it, and all that sort of thing. So I've been doing that a long time, and now we have a 14-year-old grandson that's quite the singer. But for the last year, I've been teaching him how to play piano.
Wow.
And so, I'm teaching him a lot of the songs that I know. Now, he wants to learn some of the some stuff he wants to learn. He's really into this alt R&B music like Frank Ocean or Daniel
Yeah,
Caesar, that sort of thing. So I learn those songs and teach them to him. So,
that's amazing. That
so
is really,
I
really
don't, I
special.
don't play out much. I mean, occasionally,
Yeah.
maybe once every year or two, and somebody, asks me to do something, and I'll go play 3 or 4 songs. That's about it.
Oh, I love that so much. Before I played piano, I remember we had this huge concert grand Steinway piano that was floated up the Missouri River. And you might remember that I'm from Montana, and they pulled it up out of the river off the boat and rode it up dirt roads to Bar 34 Ranch is what it was called, and set it up there in the living room. And so I remember after my dad died, I was looking for a little hope and didn't know exactly what that was. I was 4 at the time, but a couple years later, my mom had married a composer and in Montana, and I remember laying on that truck, just 8 inches off the ground, and I remember laying on that truck and just staring up at the piano and realizing that it was a stringed instrument and how much those strings really healed me, and I ended up playing keys for a long time, piano for a long time, in a Japanese method of playing called Suzuki. And it was a really special time to understand theory and music. And I remember when Toby Mac and I were working on different music that you guys had gone through, and just nuances that we were looking for, and so many times just tapping into those early childhood strings, I guess, finding those being laid down in DC Talk tracks was so rewarding and uh, really special time for me.
That's cool.
Yeah, music heals.
Music, yeah, it's, I mean, you can't touch it, you can't taste it, but you can sure feel it.
Yeah,
And it's one of those things that transcends so many things. So
it's true. When you turned 60, you decided to write a book.
I did.
And how long had that book been going around in your mind?
Well, I mean, after I left Forefront, I became an independent after that, and I started a music publishing business.
Yeah. Is that Mo?
That was Mo. It's called
Mm-hmm.
MEAUX, and
I
still
love it.
going today. And
We actually sang a song at church the other day and a couple Sundays ago. And I said to Jeff, I said, look, that's from Mo Music. I know that's Eddie DeGarmo.
yeah, that's the original spelling of DeGarmeaux. That's where that comes from. So, and Mo still, became a very, very growing enterprise very quickly. I had some great writers and producers that I also managed that produced Toby Mac records and produced, Michael Tate records and, producers like Pete Stewart that was from one of our
Yes.
bands at Forefront, Grammar Train,
Yes.
and another guy named Ted T that, has gone to greater heights. He's produced, my gosh, so much of Christian music. So I formed Mo Music in when I left Forefront in '99. We had sold Forefront 3 years prior to that to a big global business called EMI Records. Dan and I had made a commitment to stay there 3 years after that transition, and so then I moved out into music publishing, and I've been asked that question: why did you go in? I mean, that was really a good move, Eddie. Why did you go into music publishing? Well, I'm kind of the Forrest Gump of business that way because um, I had a non-compete. I couldn't start another record label for a
Mm-hmm.
period of time because I had sold one, and that's kind of standard. That the buyer doesn't want you going out and competing with him.
Right.
But I did not have a non-compete on music publishing, so I started signing songwriters, and a lot of these guys were music producers, and so I managed their careers also. So we had a great run, and it was, for me, it was 2002, I think, when Bill Hearn and Richard Green from EMI Christian Music Group, now Capital Christian Music Group, came to me and they said, Eddie, would you consider coming back and running our music publishing company? And I said, well, I've already got a music publishing company. And they said, and Bill said, just, let's figure out how they don't compete and kill each other, but you can run them both.
Wow.
So I went back as president of EMI Christian Music Publishing. And another interesting conversation I had with Bill at the time, he said, there's this genre of music, we don't really know much about it, that people call modern worship music. But we've got this band from England called Delirious, and they do it. And he said, I think there might be something there. And I said, Bill, I don't know anything about modern worship music. I had one of my writers that had written some of those songs at Mo, named Mark Bird. He had a big song called God of Wonders, and a couple other Third Day songs. But I said, Bill, I don't know anything about modern worship music much. If I know anything, he goes, you'll do fine. So we started there, and they had this kind of a fledgling website at that time called Worship Together. When I left there in 2014, we had over 1 million members on Worship Together, and another several million that would visit it pretty much every day.
It's amazing.
And we managed 17 of the top 20 songs in the world in worship music, and had some, I mean, my gosh, had some great songwriters. Still worked with Toby Mac, and he's a great songwriter, and had Third Day and Mac Powell, even though they were on another label, we had them as we published them at EMI Christian and Casting Crowns. And I brought in Matt Maher, Lord, I Need You, and some of his other, Your Grace is Sufficient, and Chris Tomlin and Matt Redman and Tim Hughes and Delirious and Stuart Townend and Keith Getty that wrote In Christ Alone. So we had a tremendous run from, I was there 12 years, almost 13 years.
Wow.
And Nick, we became the #1 faith-based publisher in the world.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, thanks.
Unbelievable.
So I turned 60. It's been a while ago now. So I'm almost about to have another birthday I don't want to talk about. But I turned 60 in 2014. And I had always promised myself that if I was able, that I would go home and at that time. And so that's what I did.
Wow. Wow. I love that challenge from Bill Hearn, and I'm glad you took him on. I remember when you guys were talking to EMI CMG about Forefront headed over there, and Bill Hearn would come back, and I had a little windowsill, like a window seat, and he would come back and talk about what's going on with radio, because Forefront was making some noise literally at that time at radio, and he would kind of pick my brain about different things. And of course, you and I would, I think, work on lots of different stuff. I remember you coming upstairs and saying, why don't you come down here and listen to what Rebecca's doing now? And she was working on the God Project. And I remember you saying to David Smallbone and Rebecca, we can't name a record God. Like, how is God selling this week? That's not going to work. So
we did, though, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah,
and you
did.
mentioned Grammatrain. I remember when we were working on so many projects, Eddie, but I remember just some Randy Matthews stuff and some old love song stuff that I had loved so much and grew up on, being so close to Seattle and growing up in Jesus music, and recutting some of those love songs, some of those old tracks. So fun.
Nick, it was a very, very difficult decision to make, to sell Forefront to a larger entity.
I know.
We didn't start it to sell it, but
Yep.
Jars of Clay. So I have to give them some of the blame for that. That they had had this massive radio hit on a song called Flood that was mainstream hit, right? And so many of our artists, like DC Talk and Audio Adrenaline, felt like they were capable
Yeah.
of that kind of, building that kind of audience as well.
Yeah.
And we did not have, as you know, we didn't have a mainstream promotional arm,
Yeah.
and mainstream radio promotional teams. I mean, there can be 25 or 30 of those people or more, that work regions around the country or just cities or whatever. And that's how they promote their music by and
Yeah.
large. And we did not have access to that. And so with EMI, one of their labels was a label called Virgin, still is, that had a very high interest in Christian music and wanted to take DC Talk first and then some others later into their promotional teams. And so that was part of that driving decision. We felt like that we never wanted to be in a place we felt like we were holding our artists back.
Yeah.
And so that's why we ended up doing that.
Eddie, I remember going out to Los Angeles to that Virgin showcase that they requested of DC Talk for their staff. And it I mean they killed it. It was phenomenal. It was everything you want DC Talk to do in front of a mainstream audience, and Virgin was eating it up, and then I remember that Toby just laid out his faith in Christ in front of them, and he's like, this is where, now you've seen our music, but let you see our hearts for a second. And it was powerful, it was
Yeah.
anointed. And I was at the end of it, I was like, well, if this deal doesn't go through, at least they've heard the gospel, but
Virgin had a lot of success with DC Talk. Between
yep,
You and Me, I think was a top 20 song. Uh, Colored People did
colored
okay.
people.
I mean,
Yep.
they had a few of them.
Yeah,
And
they did.
I mean, I worked for the mainstream for the next, I don't know, 20 years after that, and worked with a lot of people that didn't have the same viewpoint of Christianity, of course, that
Yeah,
we did. But I think that was a positive experience for them and for us. So I still feel good about all
that's good. Now I know I mentioned your book, so let's go back to that. How long was that sort of rumbling around in you before you actually sat down and had the discipline to put it to page?
Well, I never had the time to write a book while I was, chasing music because I was, oh my gosh, I was out 4 or 5 nights a week, doing
Yeah,
all that stuff.
yeah,
And so when I walked away, when I walked away, Nick, I never used the word retired. That was a word that uh, Universal had purchased EMI at that point, and that was a word that the folks at Universal asked me if they could use. Can we say you retired? It kind of makes it easier for us that you just didn't quit. You know, I said if it helps you, I don't mind. So that's what the press release said when I walked away. But I had time to write my thoughts, and I started writing them, and I threw away a lot of pieces of paper. I'll tell you. But Nick, I ended up writing that entire book on legal pads because I don't type as well as I write, and I found out that I had a better control, better mastery of the language when I didn't have to think about typing.
yep.
And so I wrote it all on legal pads. Interesting enough, I didn't know that Stephen King did that too. So I'm not trying to relate myself to Stephen King, but I did write it all on legal pads, and once I had it done, I don't know, probably took me a year or so. I knew it wasn't in the best of shape. I'd never written a book. So I hired a person to come in and help me, clean it up and put it together and that sort of thing. But I wanted to write the entire book before uh, I let anybody see it.
Wow.
And I knew if I just took it to a publisher with the notion that I want to write, you know, my life story, that it would take on different tone and fingerprints that I wasn't ready. At least that's what I thought, whether or not that's real or not. But so I wrote the whole book, and then I don't know that I ever intended to publish it, but my wife read it, Susan, and she said, Eddie, she said, this all this experience and expertise that God has allowed you to have needs to be shared. So, I think you ought to uh, let some publishers take a look at it. So
Mm.
that's how it
And the
Rebel
heart,
for God.
a rebel
Yeah,
for God. Yeah.
I didn't call it that. That was the publisher's idea. I was calling it Destined to Win, I think, which is one of the old D&K songs. Rebel for God is one of the old D&K songs, but they wanted something with a little more edge to it. So that's uh, that's what it is. And people that read it seem to get something out of it. I get great comments and letters and all that sort of thing. So hopefully it's helping some folks by
Mm.
all the stuff that I was able to experience. So
Yeah. Plus the heart of you. You had mentioned just when you'd met John Cooper, I think that showcases your heart so well. He had just lost his mom, and
so you've
he
read
was
the book.
sorry. No, I know John and Corey.
That's funny.
But he wasn't allowed to listen to DeGarmo and Key music because his mom was like, that's,
Yeah,
outside the realm of what Christian music should sound like.
for your listeners and viewers, that story is I went to church one Sunday, and back when I had all the hair and the rock and roll clothes, and an elderly gentleman came up to me and said, "Hey, I'm so and so. Would you visit my grandson? He lost his mother recently in a battle with cancer. He's having a really hard time. I really appreciate it if you go see him." And I didn't know John and didn't know this man. And so I said, well, of course I'll do that, you know. And so I don't know, a few days later, we had a time set up to meet. So, I put on my best rock and roll clothes and got on my Harley Davidson and rode to John's house. And he didn't live too far away. I didn't know him, didn't know his grandfather, but knocked on the door, and John answered the door. And I said, "Hey, I'm Eddie DeGarmo. I've come to, see how you're doing." And your grandfather invited me over to meet you. And his first words to me is, "Eddie, tell me why God didn't heal my mother before you come in." Something like that. And I looked back at him and I said, "Well, who told you that?" And he said, "Well, she died." And I said, "That doesn't mean she wasn't healed." I said, "You just don't get to see it." I said, "She's healed." And Nick, I got to tell you, I'm not smart enough or quick enough to come up with that. So I really felt like the Lord gave me those words. And he goes, "I never thought of it that way." So that was the beginning of what has become a wonderful relationship. So,
Mm, mm. So special. So special. I know he always loved getting to come over from Memphis and see
oh, yeah,
you, and very
amen.
special. I tell people one of the most awkward conversations that I've ever had in my life was at Rocket Town, when Rocket Town, the club, was down in Franklin, and I was standing between Kevin Max and Larry Norman and you and I, because we were getting ready for a showcase, and it was so funny that Larry Norman came and just hung out. Somebody said, "Where did he stay?" And I said, he probably stayed in the writers' room. I don't know that he had a home, but he was always wandering around forefront and talking to us. And it was such a special time to redo his music. Why did you want to do that?
Well, I mean, it goes way back. Larry Norman's album was the first Christian album I ever heard. And after Dana and I came to the Lord and started writing songs about our faith, we didn't know that anybody outside of Memphis existed playing Christian rock music. And I've been asked many times, why'd you choose rock and roll? I'm like, man, I don't know that I thought about it. I said, it's just the music we were raised on.
Yeah.
And I felt like it was the right way to convey what we thought to our generation. And so actually, Dana came to our apartment. There were three of us living in a one bedroom apartment playing in our Christian band in those days. And Dana came home one day with Larry Norman's record, the one that's got his hand on his head, called Only Visiting This Planet. He played it for me. And I mean, I was blown away. First of all, I loved the music, some of the songs, I Wish We'd All Been Ready and The Outlaw and Great American Novel. I loved the music, but I saw that it was on Capitol Records, which was a large music label and mainstream label. And I was like, well, maybe there's somebody that would, help us get our music out there too. So that's how that started. And our very first tour that we did in those days, we were called The Christian Band. We weren't very original with our name. But our very first tour, when our first album came out in 1970, late 77, early 78, was with Larry Norman. So he took us on tour, kind of like I took DC Talk on tour, right? And of course, he was very popular in those days. And we formed a very strong bond that just lasted. And I love Larry. I will tell you, I'd say it if he was sitting here in the room, Larry's pretty wacky, man. Larry's crazy, but I loved him. And
Yeah.
he was very, very talented.
Yeah.
And Dan Brock, my partner in Forefront, and I were big fans of his music. And so we thought it would be a very good tribute and honor to him to have our Forefront artists each pick one of his songs
Yeah.
and record it for a tribute. So that's how that album came.
It was
Into,
amazing
yeah,
to be able to work that album to radio, and just also amazing to have Larry talk to me about how those songs were being received, and he's just like, this is mind blowing, how these songs are being received. And um it was great that they got another chance to go around.
that's good. I like hearing that. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was a good moment. Sure was.
So many good moments. I've loved talking with you today and catching up. And I just want to say thank you so much for so many good moments in history um
Well,
that
hey,
you've given me.
you were a big part of that story, Nick. You did us well, did us good, and got our music out there, and I appreciate that. So, and
It was a
glad
blast.
haven't spoken to you in many years, and glad to see that you're doing well.
Thank you. Yes, I know. I'm so glad to be able to reconnect. Ah, you've blessed me up. Thank you so much.
Well, you
Thank
have
you.
a wonderful rest of your day and week, and I hope you get this out there and a lot of people see it. So,
Yeah, me too, man. Me too.
yeah. All right,
All
talk
right,
to
let's
you
not make
soon.
it so long next time.
Okay, we're on.
Tell
Talk to
Susan
you.
hi. Tell Shannon hi.
She turned out pretty good. So we're proud of
If
her.
a dad don't say his self.
That's right. Talk to you soon, Nick. Bye.
Bye, Eddie.